Hello and welcome, I'm BoredGamer, and today we're going to be making a gaming computer for $100 for the actual base unit and pretty much everything else, and then $200 for the graphics card, making a combined total for $300 for a gaming PC. Most of the parts in this guide are second-hand, but this is easily repeatable. All of the items should be available for you to get yourself and put together yourself. There are time skips in the description to the various parts of the video and the guide, and they will include sourcing parts and PCs and the workstations, exactly what we went for, the system specs of actually what we got in the end, installing, benchmarks, and then the conclusion talking about the system as a whole. Firstly, let's talk about sourcing. So we're going to be grabbing the base unit and pretty much everything else for the computer that we need for around $100. For me, that's around £70 to £80. This is going to be everything we need except for the graphics card, basically. Firstly, eBay is your friend. Now, there are lots of alternatives to eBay. eBay is what I use. There's Craigslist and all that sort of jazz based on where you are in the world. Gumtree, I don't know, lots of things. I'm going to spend $200 of my budget on my graphics card. When you're doing that, you can go for a second-hand 970 GTX or a brand new RX 470 or 480 if you're going down the AMD route, or you want a new graphics card, something possibly more powerful. Today, we're going to use the 970 in this build. I will talk about the RX 400 series at some point very soon, when I don't have to conform to any NDAs. You might have seen on Linus Tech Tips as well, and some of the other cool big building super cheap rig channels, where they've looked at server components and servers. Even here, actually, I've looked at building PCs out of servers before. Now, my current preference is to actually build budget gaming PCs out of PC workstations rather than servers. You can get some very good equivalent to second-gen i7s incredibly cheaply, and you can source much less obsolete tech than the stuff that we've seen on other people's channels. So if you do a little bit of research, you Google a bit, you have a little look around, you can get much better PCs than what I have seen on other people's channels and other people's videos. I recommend looking for tower servers or tower workstations. If you're going down the server route, which is a little bit more of a project, really, the servers, because you need to do a bit more research into them. They're not as easy to just plug and play as workstations are. But the HP ML ProLiant series, the Generation 6 series, there's the ML 350, the 370, the 110 if you want to go very small form factor, and the 330, all G6. And literally just typing that search into Google or to eBay will give you results. The HP ProLiant ML G6 towers are erratic in price though, especially in the UK, though I have picked up a pair of them in the past of 350s for £50 each, fully outfitted. But eBay can sometimes have none for days, or conversely have beautiful little gems there. Workstation wise, and this is what we're going to be looking at in this video really, again I recommend searching on eBay for a Z210, Z400, Z600, Z800, again very HP heavy. They are workstations rather than the servers, so you'll find them in like the desktops all in one section. The Z600 and Z800 along with the ML350 and ML370 are all dual CPU setups. And my last setup was a dual CPU setup and dual PSU setup. So check out my Scrapyard Citizen video that I did a little while ago to find out more about that and exactly how those builds work. But today, we're going to be looking at the Dell PowerEdge T3500. Now, these are absolutely great because they don't seem to bottleneck, and they are the cheapest options that I could find at the moment. If people want to also look for the T5500s, they're a little bit better, and I think you can get them in dual CPU configurations as well if you want to go down that route. It is literally as easy as typing those searches into eBay or your purchasing engine of choice and seeing what's available at the time. And I quite enjoy this stage because it's literally trying to find a bargain. But there are so many of these around that you can easily replicate them. Why in particular the T3500? All of those systems I kind of mentioned are quite widely available, with new auctions becoming available every day on eBay very, very regularly, basically. But the T3500s aren't too old so that they actually don't have obsolete tech, but they're not so new that they're going to be expensive. They're extremely cheap. They're in the kind of sweet Goldilocks point, really. So they've got PCI Express 2 16 times slots. They've got some DDR3 RAM support. They can support really powerful Xeon 4 to 6 core processors. All of the servers and workstations that I mentioned are just really easily sourceable. You just have to look around as stocks change, and you can get some great deals if you're persistent. It's not about luck, it's about genuinely being persistent, checking out eBay over a couple of weeks, checking out Craigslist, that sort of thing. You can net yourself a good deal. And I have grabbed 5 of these T3500s for about $400 in total for a big group of them, just to make sure it's repeatable. And I'm going to be doing lots of different things with them, and because they were so cheap. So stay tuned for that in the future. So when you're purchasing stuff like this, it's going to come with a wide variety of different hardware based on the actual individual unit you buy. So always check out exactly what is contained within the auction or the server or the workstation, whatever you buy. Now, what you're looking for really is a tower, because they're much easier to work with. Workstations are easier to work with servers normally. You will need to check whatever you purchase, its compatibilities and specs. So literally go on Google, type in whatever system you've got. So in this case, I'd type in a T3500 specs, and it would give me a spec sheet of it. I then check the compatibility of the CPUs, the RAM, and all that sort of stuff. You can also look at possibly getting rack mounts or blades if you're going the server route. They're normally cheaper, but they're a project. If you want to get it working, you're going to have to do lots of crazy stuff with them. And this video is all about ease. So we're going to work with workstations. We're going to work with that T3500. PSUs. So this is quite an important one. The power supply, what's its wattage that it comes with? If it indeed comes with one. Is it using proprietary PSUs? That sort of stuff. A lot of these servers and workstations might be using proprietary PSUs, so standard ones won't work with the motherboard. You can, however, hack some to work, or just use a second PSU, module case, or tape it in. I've done a video on that last video I did on my Scrapyard PC. Boom, have a look there if you want to look at second PSUs. It is pretty simple to get them working. They're not the neatest thing in the world, but you can just jam them in if you have to. Also, one of the more important things when you're looking at PSUs is, do they have a 6 or an 8-pin adapter, or both, or multiple ones for GFX and graphics cards? You can get adapters to allow these PSUs to work with the graphics cards, but daisy chaining stuff together like that isn't the best option, especially with 8-pin adapters. 8-pin adapters aren't particularly effective at actually getting graphics card, from my experience, enough power to work. I mean, you can get crashes, or it can just be not enough power to power your graphics card. With PCI Express slots, this is obviously really important because this is where most of the power of your gaming rig is going to come from your graphics card, so you need a PCI Express slot, and you need to make sure that the board and case can fit a full-length 16 times PCI graphics card of some description. Gen 2 is fine, Gen 3 is amazing, but if you can find Generation 2, I mean, when we're looking at budget PCs, Generation 2 is perfect. RAM-wise, you can source incredibly cheap RAM later, but it is worth checking RAM compatibility online. Some servers require special configurations and can be especially finicky with RAM. Workstations much less, so you can kind of put different RAM in. So, for example, the system we're about to see, I've got 8 gigs of RAM, and I think it's from 3 different RAM vendors, so it does kind of work. We also only need 8 to 12 gigs of RAM, in my opinion, for kind of this end of gaming. We're not going to be running loads of programs in the background, so 8 gigs would be fine, and RAM is so cheap you could go up to 12 if you wanted for another literal like $5 more. The CPU is potentially your most expensive and important part after the graphics card. We don't want the CPU to bottleneck the graphics card. We will talk about that more a bit later in brief, but what we're after here is a quad core, really, at least. Xeon is not a dirty word. You can check your processors that you're searching out on ARC. I'll put a link in the description. Good ones to go for are X5500s, X5600s, W3500s, and a lot of the E55 and 5600 range as well. These are all pretty cheap Xeon CPUs that are still relevant today, though. At the price to performance end, I do prefer the X55 and X5600 range. They give really quite great performance, and they're also available in hex-core range as well for those of you that are going to be budget power users. That said, you can grab all of the series in hex cores as well, but you might get lower clock speeds, and we're after something with at least a clock speed of 2.9 gigs. They're like that core standard non-boosted speed. I would prefer over 3 gigs, 3.2 being kind of a target, but if you can get more, that's great. In all situations, Google is your friend. Make sure you Google whatever system you're looking at on eBay or wherever, and then the word spec or specifications afterwards, and then check your system, CPU compatibility, RAM compatibility, all that sort of stuff. You are going to need to research just a little bit to find out everything, but you need to do that, otherwise you're going to end up with a load of random bits and components. You're like, this doesn't work. He said it would work. We're also talking about real world gains here. It's important to remember that synthetic benchmarks that we're going to talk about in a second, and stacking certain components like RAM, like, well, I want 32 gigs of RAM because it's so cheap. They're not necessarily going to give you real world gaming performance. So with most modern games as well, the GPU is the most important part of the system, and CPUs won't bottleneck as often as people might think, as long as you have strong single core performance and at least 4 threads. Not 4 cores, 4 threads. But we can debate that for a very long time. I've been doing lots of tests recently with GTA 5 and Star Citizen and stuff. You only really need 4 threads and some form of quite powerful clock. And then your GPU is going to be fully utilized before your CPU will be. So, obviously, the main part of this video is the spec and cost breakdown of the system that we got and how it benchmarks and how easy is it to replicate. So, I actually bought about 5 of these computers now to prove how easy it was to replicate. And I'm going to go for like the middle-ish system. I got some great deals with some great X processors, but we're going to grab one around in the middle. I got a Dell Precision T3500 quad-core Xeon W3565 processor, which is a 3.2 gig processor. It's not the best of the lot we got. We got some great X processors, but I feel that they were too good at deals to be able to replicate regularly, and this is more than good enough for our needs anyway. I expect that the GPU will almost always be maxed out rather than the CPU. So, yeah, after a few days on eBay, I spotted loads of different ones, and I spotted this one. So it comes with the tower case, it came with a 500 watt PSU, a 6-pin adapter on that PSU for graphics cards. We are kind of limited to not use 8-pin graphics cards, but that's going to be fine at the range we're looking at. The CPU, as I said, was that 3.2 gig core W3565. It did come with a NVIDIA Quadro, which was fine for actually setting up the PC while I was waiting for my graphics card to turn up. It came with 6 gigs of RAM as well, and that was £70 for that system delivered, or around $92. I think it's probably a little less in dollars now that the pound has become quite weak. The CPU isn't an X series, but it has good clock speed, and spoilers, the GPU does get maxed out in my tests before the CPU does. I grabbed some extra RAM, just 2 gigs of 10600E RAM for the system, checked its compatibility, grabbed something on eBay, which cost me £3 or about $4. You could easily put a load more RAM in if you want, but we don't need to. We only need 8 gigs really. We will at some point benchmark it with 12 and 16 and see if it makes a vast difference, but it won't. I'm hoping it won't. The hard drive and SSD. So you can go for a second-hand SSD, 120 gigs kind of thing. I got one for $15. You might not want to use second-hand hard drives though. You don't know what was on them before, and they could be damaged, they could be really old, they might have loads of bad sectors on. You can grab cheap mechanical drives now from Amazon and eBay for under $25. The same with SSDs, you can grab 60 to 120 gig ones for under $25 now. So if you want to go down that route, operating system wise, I would pretty much suggest always going for Windows 10 Pro now. I will put a link to Kinguin in the description below because you can get them for $20 for legit CD keys. So yeah, I don't see there as a reason not to go for Windows 10 Pro, and I think that Windows can still be upgraded either cheap or freely if you've got an older version as well. I've made a huge optimization and setup guide for Windows 10 and why to choose it. I'll put that link in the info below as well. That is kind of an important part of the setup of your gaming PC, getting all those tweaks. Literally, you want to be squeezing every ounce of performance you can out of a budget PC, but they can really, really compete with some of the big boys. You could also go for a free operating system like SteamOS or something like that if you wanted to, but if you did what I did there exactly and copied me exactly, it would cost you $111 if you needed an SSD as well. But I do live in the UK where we have to pay VAT and stuff is disproportionately expensive as we live on a little tiny island, and it was a lot easier to do it on the American eBay. I found a lot more sources for stuff and I found it a bit cheaper as well. So you should be able to do that actually reasonably under $100 to get that base unit. Just some other important points of note when you're purchasing. Really, really make sure you Google and research pretty much everything that's in the system you're looking at, especially the processor and especially the compatibilities for stuff. Make sure it's also not listed for parts and not working. If it is, then make sure you're just getting something super cheap or getting something out of it. Just assume that anything that's for parts not working is just totally broken. Used is your friend. Used means that if it is broken or anything, you just send it back. You just go, this isn't working, and you'll get a refund. Also, you can make a little bit of money back if you're on a super tight budget by selling anything you don't want. I mean, you might only get a few dollars for like a super old Quadro, but every little helps at this kind of level. And these workstations that I'm working with, the T3500s, fortunately come with onboard audio. Several servers that I've worked with in the past didn't, and I had to purchase separate sound cards, so check to see if there is onboard audio as well. Rule of thumb, just check to make sure it says used and working. So card-wise, you're going to be grabbing, in this particular video, a used 970. You can grab them for around $200. I found loads and loads and loads across the UK and America. So at time of recording, the RX 480s have literally just come out, and I can see the 8GB version for $240. But the 4GB version will also be available. I just happen to have one in my hands at the moment. So we'll test that out and see how well they do. I'm not entirely sure how much the 4GB one's going to be in dollars, but it looks to be in the UK, when we have to pay VAT, £175, £180. So we should be able to get them within that $200 price range, hopefully. So last time I did a scrap build, I was using dual CPUs, and I wanted to go down the single CPU route. This gives us a load more opportunities to find the servers and workstations and that sort of stuff. But also I wanted to see, is it necessary to have dual CPUs at the low end, at the cheap end? Can we get around that? Is it going to be bottlenecked? And where's it going to be bottlenecked? Also, the last one we did, we got 11,000 score with that dual CPU build. It was a bit more expensive, and we were using a 980 Ti to benchmark as well. Got between 10 and 11,000. Please check that video out if you want to see more on that. But we don't need 16 CPU threads, and we're going to be fine with this processor. Installing and overclocking and that sort of stuff. So installation-wise, I use Windows 10. I make a USB key with the Windows 10 install. Link to Kingwin with the CD keys for Windows 10 Pro if you want them. I've also got an Ultimate Windows 10 tweaks and gaming guide. Again, I'll put a link to that, and I'll put links in the description for obvious software and drivers that you might need. Overclocking. We're not going to overclock the system at all. We will do that in another video. Number one, it can be quite hard to overclock some of these servers and some of these workstations. They're not meant to be overclocked. They also have passive coolers on their CPUs, a lot of them. So in the future, when I've literally jury-rigged with cable ties a fan onto that onto that CPU cooler, then I might think about overclocking it. There's other programs that we can use to overclock stuff that isn't normally overclockable. So let's talk about benchmarking, as I suppose it's the main thing here. So in 3D Mark Firestrike, we got 9,290 as a score, and then we put that into extreme mode, we got 4,812. Though in extreme mode, I was also recording using OBS, so that might have knocked the score down in extreme by a couple of hundred. But this is a great score for a $300 PC. These are synthetic scores though, and don't really equate to real world frames for the reality that is gaming. Though what it's done here is proved that it's over the recommendation from 3D Mark Firestrike for VR. And I played some VR games in it. In fact, I played The Lab and Portal Stories VR, and with no complaints. I couldn't tell that I wasn't on my main PC. It was exactly the same experience for me. So that's a great thing. Ashes of Singularity as well. I'll put those benchmarks on the screen. I'm not actually, I don't really know what's going on with Ashes of Singularity. I have no idea. So I'll put the things on the screen. You can disseminate that information yourself. Average frame rates of 39 to 40. Overwatch. So actual in-game performance. This was really impressive. So in 1080p, we had 100 to 160 frames per second. Kind of constantly, with an average of 120 frames per second. That is on Epic. That is with everything switched up onto Epic. I really like that. I think that's great. We also tried 1440p, which we got 58 to 80 frames per second with an average of 65, again on Epic. If you can play 1440p on modern games, and I know that Overwatch isn't that taxing, but if you can play on 1440p with some of these modern games, I think that's a great bargain for $300. Star Citizen. So obviously this is a game that's very close to my heart and what my channel is mostly about, and the main reason I want to build these scrapyard or cheaper PCs, so that everyone can have access to it. It was originally locking at 60 frames per second in all of my tests, and I couldn't work out why, but I think it was because precision that I was using to show my FPS was exploding or doing something. So I turned that off, and I got Steam Overlay to get my frames per second, which seems to actually work. You can add any game pretty much to Steam as a non-Steam game, and you can run its frames per second in the overlay, which is absolutely great. So I turned that off, and I got some really impressive results in Star Citizen's Area 18 and single-player Vandal Swarm, smashing averages of 60 to 80 frames, with lows of 48 and highs of 120. Erratic frames for an alpha game, but it is extremely playable on the highest settings on 1080p. So I do want to talk about bottlenecking again. So bottlenecking is where a component is being maxed out or fully 100% utilized, and then prevents another component from becoming more or fully utilized because of that, because it's creating a bottleneck effectively. This is most common with CPUs to GPUs, where they're trying to send data and one is being overly used, or vice versa, so GPUs to CPUs. This happens much more rarely than you think with modern systems. And when we're talking about the 970s and RX 480s, what we want here, really with our budget build, is for the GPU to be maxed out where possible. That shows us that we're getting the best possible potential from our gaming tower that we've made, so that we're best utilising that GPU. So, we're basically, we're not constraining the GPU by shoddy CPU or shoddy choices. If, however, we're not constraining that GPU, if it's being only utilised, say, 60%, there are some other things that we can do. So 1440p and 4K resolutions. If you're buying something like this for a temporary solution, or even to upgrade eventually, or as a backup, then your video card can possibly get some more power out of it. You might upgrade to a 1080 later or something crazy. So say your GPU is being utilized 50%. You can up your resolution, whether it be an actual native upgrade or DSR or VSR, which is literally downscaling from a high resolution like 4K to a lower resolution like 1080p on a 1080p monitor. That basically puts more pressure on your GPU, makes the screen prettier, pretty, but you're also getting more effective utilization out of your entire system, and you're getting a better visual experience. So I will put a link on how to DS or VSR, so that's dynamic super resolutions and virtual super resolutions, based on whether you're using an NVIDIA card for DSR or a AMD card for VSR. I'll put that link there so you can see how to do that. And some other bits and bobs really. So I've sprayed and modded and done some other things to my system. So I grabbed $3 or £2 worth of spray paint from a pound shop near my house and sprayed the front bezel and the side panel yellow. I'm going to do this to all of my T3500s that I bought. I'm going to do them in different colours in the same style. I'm not very good at painting or modding or anything like that. Any form of art, but I will learn. This is the idea. I will learn by doing random stuff like this. Obviously, clean your system out first, that sort of stuff. Clean all your components, clean your system, clean it safely. If you're going to reapply thermal paste on your CPU, make sure you wipe off the old thermal paste with some isopropyl alcohol, you know what I mean, rubbing alcohol stuff. That's always good, otherwise you're going to have a bad thermal experience. I'm also going to put a CPU or a case fan. I'm going to literally cable tie it to that passive CPU cooler, and that will get the CPU more cooled because it was running at in the low 80s, which isn't appropriate for my needs. I want to overclock it eventually. Also, cables internally. Some of the systems that you look at won't have high quality SATA cables, so you might have to purchase some. You can get them for incredibly inexpensive, but grabbing the SATA 3 cables, that's kind of good manners for your system. Also, converters and adapters. You might need another 6-pin adapter. For that 970 that I used, I needed a additional 6-pin to SATA or SATA to 6-pin adapter to get that card working. Otherwise, it wouldn't have booted, it wouldn't have had enough power. Now, I try not to use SATA or anything to 8-pin adapters, because 8-pin adapters are notoriously bad for your graphics cards. They don't provide enough power a lot of the time and that sort of stuff. You might have a great kind of experience with them. I've had bad experiences. So upgrades that you could do, or I'll be doing, I suppose. You could upgrade to 12 gigs of RAM. You could upgrade to more if you wanted, but I don't think you need more than 8. I will try it with 12 gigs and benchmark it and see. We'll do that next time. It's only a few more dollars effectively. Why not? We'll also try overclocking this system in the future. We'll have in the very, very near future be testing it with the RX 480 and 470. Also with a hex core processor. We'll try it with the X5670 or something like that, and some other CPUs to see if there are great performance gains to be had. But thanks for watching, guys. Please check out our original Scrapyard Citizen build for the dual CPU system that we did with the ML350 G6 server, and that was actually a pretty good build as well, but I do think this one was a lot cheaper and a lot better, especially because we have those cards, those RX 480s now, those RX 400 series, and those 970s are so cheap second hand. So please tell me in the comments below your success or horror stories with Scrapyard PCs that you've either tried yourself or you're thinking of purchasing. I'm interested to see if you've had some great successes with other workstations and that sort of stuff. Possibly you found something cheaper. Possibly you've found something significantly more expensive. You're like, I can't find a 970 for $200 and that sort of stuff. So please tell me your comments below. This will constantly evolve, but stuff can only really become cheaper or harder to get, I suppose. If we started a spate of people buying loads of T3500s or servers and that sort of stuff, they would be harder to get into our grubby little mitts. And if you want me to look at particular processors, particular servers, particular workstations, again, drop it in the comments. I'm interested to learn more about this. I do think there's so much potential to make incredibly cheap PCs, but also some cool little mods. If you can grab $100, $80 PCs, whatever, that are powerful enough to play modern games well, you can start building them into stuff. You can start giving them to young teenagers and kids to learn how to mod PCs, to learn how to build PCs without the risk of it being a huge financial drain. And this is what I love about this. I love getting performance out of this. And there's so much more potential here with overclocking, with tweaking load of the settings, modding the internals, getting the processor cooler, that sort of stuff. I really like this, and it's really cheap. And yeah, I was really, really impressed with the amount of performance that this PC gave. So yeah, check out a T3500, guys. Check out all of those servers and workstations that I mentioned. I hope you have great success, and whether you do or don't, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help me. And check out Star Citizen, because it's a great game, and now it's more accessible to people with cheap PCs. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the verse.